Hi, I'm Laura Coltis, your host for Arts Delight. This week's guest is Ian Sutherland, the Dean for Memorial University's School of Music. We open the show with Ian playing a piano piece to show you that Ian is a lot more than an administrator. When we return, we'll show you the person behind the degrees.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Welcome back. You may be forgiven in thinking that Ian is from a larger international city, but no, he's from Lewisport, and he explains Lewisport is not a bad place to be if you're musically inclined.
I think growing up in Lewisport was a great experience. It was a fantastic place to grow up in terms of family life and a nice, small but not too small community and so on. But even more so, it was a place that very much supported the arts, particularly music. It was a fertile ground for myself as a young musician and other musicians as well. There's quite a large number for a smaller town of people that have come out of Lewisport that have gone on to at least study music professionally, some to go on to become professional musicians. So it was a great place with a lot of stuff going on in the arts, particularly music, yeah.
Why did that happen in Lewisport? I mean, it never came out of a vacuum, you know.
No, certainly not. I think one probably can't come up with specific reasons why all these things always happen,
Sure.
but the things that played into it were a good group of musicians that lived and worked in Lewisport and in central Newfoundland more generally, who were involved in making music, who were involved in teaching music privately in their own homes and studios and things like that. So there was a lot of that kind of musical activity happening. There were some good choirs and churches, that kind of thing was going on. For Lewisport in particular, though, I would add the school system. So we had fantastic music teachers through primary, through elementary, and junior and senior high school. And that was a program that was started by a man named Rod Drover, I do believe, quite a while ago, probably 10 or 15 years before I ever got into junior or senior high. He started a fantastic instrumental band program there that just went gangbusters, to use a pretty informal word. And the teacher that followed him, or at least the teacher that I had, was Mr. Lindy Witt, and he had a fantastic band program in junior and senior high, so the junior concert band, junior jazz band, senior concert band, senior jazz band. Great program, great music making, and we were always involved with performances at the school, but through festivals. We did tours to Ontario. There was just a whole lot of stuff going on. And I think because it was so successful, there was a huge amount of community support. So when I was growing up in high school, for example, I think the concert band achievements were just as celebrated as the hockey team achievements. So
Well, that's saying something, I'll take that.
In rural Newfoundland, that's particularly, I guess, in the 90s, that was saying something, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm always, again, I'm surprised at these pockets of whatever criterion or something that develops. I vaguely remember a story from Ignatius Rumbold, who was a choir director in St. John's a long time ago. But they used to go on the Newfie Bullet. They'd have all the stuff for the Pirates of Penzance, and they'd go right across the island. Yeah. So they'd stop in Buckens and they'd do that show. Yeah. And I said, my God, that's amazing. Yeah.
I think the university has played a huge role in developing the arts right across the province. So back in those days, yes, Ignatius Nish Rumbold was going out. Don Cook, the founder of the School of Music, used to do choirs across the province. And I think in those days he probably actually flew out to Gander and then went to Grand Falls and did community choirs and things. So there was a lot of seeding activity that happened through the university for sure. I think there are other institutions that have also played a big role in this. For example, the music festivals, the Kiwanis and Rotary music festivals have played a massive role in supporting and encouraging the arts and bringing developmental opportunities for particularly musicians to smaller parts of the province that don't have the population density of St. John's. And yeah, broaden those development opportunities that would not necessarily have otherwise been there. So the university institutions like the Kiwanis and the Rotary festivals have played a massive role over the history of the province in developing music.
Yeah, and I suppose in some respects that might be hard to, when you're laying the seed for stuff, you don't see the results until 20 years down the road maybe, so it must be a bit frustrating, but obviously it's bloomed in Newfoundland for sure, right?
It has. We're a very musical province, Newfoundland and Labrador, and there is, of course, a tremendous amount of fantastic traditional music, what's often called trad music, going on as well. And there have been institutions grow up around that, like the Folk Festival here in St. John's, and other festivals across the province in rural communities, in Fogo, in Lewisport, and other places. So those kinds of festivals and activities really honor, value, support all kinds of musical explorations, from classical to our traditional folk musics, and many other things in between. And you're right, there's often a long game played on this, and if I can stand on a soapbox for a moment, it's often easy, or thought to be easy, to cut the arts in the school system or in a provincial budget if we need to save money. Because in the short term you don't necessarily see the pain, but if you go out longer term you would see the downsizing, the lack of opportunities over the longer period. So we were very lucky that back 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, there was a lot of investment done by the government, by the university, by communities to grow festivals and things that paid massive dividends.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and when we were talking about trad music and classical music, I just remember seeing a performance by Stan Pickett and his daughter Angela, who was, she's a classical violinist and goes all over, and that's her career now, right?
Yep.
And that's where it came from.
Absolutely. Angela is a graduate of the School of Music here at Memorial, actually, and she's definitely based in New York. I think she might have actually gone to the Juilliard School after she left here as a violist, and and crosses all kinds of disciplines in music, from traditional to classical.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Music is truly an international language. At a very young age, Ian found himself at a summer piano retreat in Vermont. It was the first of many eye-opening stages in his life.
When I finished high school, I actually went down to the United States, to Vermont, for a couple of months and studied at the Adamant School, which is a school for pianists only in the hills of Vermont, and then came directly to Memorial University in the September after I graduated from high school to start my Bachelor of Music degree.
I'm curious about the Vermont thing. Was that a little bit of an eye-opener? Was there, you were in a different culture, a different country, and said, oh gee, I never heard that before, or they really accentuate the arts here. Yeah. Was it like that at all? Or?
That was an incredible experience. And it actually came out of the Kiwanis Music Festival in Grand Falls, the Central Kiwanis Festival. So that year, this was my last year in high school, I remember her name. It was Gwen Beamish. She was a faculty member at Western University, what then was the University of Western Ontario. And she was the adjudicator for senior piano that year. And so I played for her many, many times throughout the classes in the festival. And towards the end of the festival, she took me aside and she said, Ian, I assume you're planning to go off and study music at university. I said, yeah, I'm planning to go to Memorial. I've been accepted and so on. And she said, I think you should really come down to this school that we run in Vermont. It's a school for pianists only. It was a school that was actually started, and I won't remember the founder's name, but the founder of the school was a student of Franz Liszt. And it brought pianists from all over the world, from the United States, from Canada, but we also had pianists there the summer I was there from China, from Russia, and so on. And it was an intensive 2 months of piano only. So it was eye-opening. I got to meet lots of young pianists from around the world, lots of performances, lots of master classes, working with some really cool piano teachers from Russia to the United States, Canada, and so on, which also really set me up very well for starting in my Bachelor of Music degree here about a month or so afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm almost, again, we're talking about seating. I know my father was one of the co-founders or part of a group that got Kiwanis going. Mm-hmm. I'm just delighted over that. But the effects of that, and also we can kind of dovetail into, I always think about the sisters and choral music and choir music in Newfoundland, and Newfoundland seemed to do so well at these situations. This foundation was laid a long time ago, and it's bearing fruit now.
Absolutely. Certainly in St. John's, the Sisters of Mercy and the Presentation Sisters have made an enormous impact on the arts, music in particular, choral music. They were teaching piano lessons, voice lessons, all that stuff for many, many years in schools like Holy Heart of Mary, which still today has a very good choral tradition and singing and musical program at that high school. So they have laid, a lot of the foundations for the musical activity that's come. And I'm glad that today we also have this more diverse viewpoint on developing and valuing music. So it's the classical traditions, of course, but those are European traditions. So also bringing forward our own folk traditions and other forms of music as we become a more multicultural and diverse society. So the explosion of music. But it all goes back to, there were foundations laid by people like the sisters that you've mentioned that made music an important part of the fabric of our culture. And also highlighted the fact that music was an important part of the fabric of our culture. And Sisters of Mercy and Presentation Sisters still very much support the school of music through donations and scholarships and so on.
So you came to the School of Music here and studied here, and you got a degree or a couple of degrees?
Yep, 2 degrees. So I first completed my Bachelor of Music degree here in piano performance. And then I went out into the world of work, as it were. So I was working as a musician, playing, teaching piano and theory and stuff privately, working with choirs. I was a gigging musician, which was great. So I did that for a little while. And then Tom Gordon, who's a former director, dean of the School of Music, I remember it was at a Christmas concert for the Festival and Chamber Choirs of the university. This was after I finished my undergraduate degree. And it was a Christmas concert for the choirs at the Anglican Cathedral. And I had just decided to go to the Christmas concert. And who should happen to sit next to me but Dr. Tom Gordon. And so he and I, of course, struck up a conversation. And he said, what are you planning to do with your life? Or some question like that. Tom's famous for asking very good, timely questions. Tom's still a very good friend of mine today. And so we started talking about that, and I said, well, I do want to go and do further studies, master's degree, and eventually a doctorate. And he said, well, why don't you do your master's degree here? He said, you can still carry on the professional work you're doing, but come into the master's program. It's a great program. At that time, it was quite new. So I'd say I was in the 2nd class or 3rd class of the master's program. So I took Tom up on that. I applied and came back, was accepted and came back as a master's student. So I did a master's degree then in, again, performance, piano performance. And once I finished the master's degree here, I decided I'm going to go all the way without going back into the world of professional work full time. I decided to stay a student and went off to do my doctorate.
And where did you do your doctorate to?
I did my doctorate in England at the University of Exeter, which is down the southwest, about 2 hours by train southwest of London. In Devon, the county of Devon, which has very strong roots to Newfoundland.
Certainly, for sure.
Yeah.
And how did that go? Like, was that again another eye-opener, choral music or whatever?
Well, it was very much an eye-opener because I, in a sense, changed fields of study. When I finished my performance degree, my master's degree in performance, I was feeling like, well, I can play the piano fairly well. I was sort of happy with my ability to play the piano, but I had this long history of intellectual research kind of interests that I always wanted to explore. And I thought, well, let's make a shift. Let's do my doctorate as a PhD, a research-based degree, as opposed to a performance-based degree. So my PhD is actually in sociology and philosophy, a double PhD. And the fact that I went to the University of Exeter was, in some sense, happenstance. So I had a conversation with my faculty advisor here, who's Dr. Cody Zago at the time, and talking about where I would apply for my doctorate. And I kind of had the sense that I wanted to do the doctorate in musicology or sociology of music and philosophy and so on. And she said, if you could study with anybody in the world for your doctoral degree, who would it be? And I stopped and I thought, within 5 seconds I responded, well, I would study with Professor Tia Denora, who had a well-known music sociologist, written many, many books in music sociology, big study on Beethoven in her early years. Then she pioneered the music in everyday life approach to musical studies and so on. And Cadi Zago said to me, well, why don't you just get in touch with her to see if she's accepting new students, and maybe that's the path you can go on. So I left Dr. Zago's office and I went to my computer, I Googled Tia Denora.
I love those stories, and I love them.
And I found her address. I found she was at the University of Exeter. I sent her an email, and 24, 48 hours later, she emailed me back.
Oh my.
And we started corresponding, and together we put together my sort of application for doctoral studies and applications for scholarships and all that stuff. And about a year later, I found myself living and studying in England.
This show is brought to you by the Craft Council of Newfoundland and Labrador. Visit us in our new space at 275 Duckworth Street and discover what it means to be handcrafted.
Where does coming back to Newfoundland fit into this, picture?
Well, that was a tremendous opportunity that presented itself in a way unexpectedly. So prior to coming in as the Dean of the School of Music, I was based in Slovenia, a small country in Central Europe between Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. Slovenia's right there in the center. And I had been there for 6 years, and I was certainly not looking to leave. I was an associate, at that point, associate dean for research and head of graduate studies, a PhD program, for a business school in Slovenia. Loved my job, fantastic colleagues, and was kind of thinking, yeah, I would be there for a few more years at least. And lo and behold, one day I got an email. As I tell these stories, I realize that these major junctures in my life have all sort of happened just out of the blue. So I got an email from a search consultant that was working with Memorial University on the search process for the next dean of the School of Music. And the email went something like, Dear Dr. Sutherland, we don't know if you were aware, but the dean position of the School of Music at Memorial University is open. You've been named as a potential candidate. Would you be interested in having a conversation about that, whether or not you'd want to apply? It literally came out of the blue. I mean, I wasn't sitting there waiting for an email from a search consultant.
Things seem to happen like that to you, Ian.
Yeah, but I think they happen like that to a lot of people. And I've had many conversations with people, particularly like younger students, about how do you make your way in life, and how do you find interesting things to do. Sometimes they end up being successful. And one of the things that I've always said to people is be open to every possibility that comes along. And I think that's one thing that I've always done. I've always been willing to say yes to stuff. So I said yes to that email. And I had a conversation with the search consultant, and had a conversation with my partner, who's in Slovenia, about this. And made the conscious decision I would throw my hat into the ring, as it were, to become the next dean of the School of Music. And lo and behold, about 7 or 8 months after that initial email, I got a phone call saying that I was the chosen candidate.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah.
So what was it like coming back to Newfoundland now after? You seem so content in Slovenia.
I mean, Slovenia is a fantastic, beautiful country. Beautiful in terms of its geography, its food, its culture, as well as the people.
It seems to support culture a lot, music a lot too.
Yeah, and that's quite true of most European countries. I mean, most European countries, even European municipalities, support the arts more than the entire government of Canada. I don't want to get back on a political soapbox, but there's just more of intertwining of certain forms of culture with daily life. So it's perfectly normal for an average Slovenian to go to the opera, to the symphony, to the theater, whatever, on a Thursday night or a Friday night. But yeah, they do. There's a massive support structure around that. Of course, we have to remember that all those art forms, opera, the symphonic works, etc., they all came from Europe. So in a sense, they're almost their traditional music. So this is a very close tie. But no, I was very content in Slovenia, a beautiful country. Was not looking to move. But this was a fantastic opportunity and one that I've never ever regretted for a moment since. The School of Music just last year celebrated its 40th anniversary. So in 40 years, the school went from zero and being founded in temporary buildings over by the Arts Administration Building, or what is now the Arts Administration Building, to this fantastic facility, and went from a small cohort of 6 or 7 students, I think, were in that very first class, to a school that now has a little over 200 undergraduate and graduate students. So we've grown by leaps and bounds over those 40 years. As we've grown a massive reputation in the country. So we really are seen as one of the leading schools in Canada. And we attract students from across the country. Still, a significant portion of our students come from the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's part of our mandate as Memorial University to the province. But increasingly, we have students from across the country. Just this past year, we welcomed, for example, 5 students from Ontario into the Bachelor of Music program. So we're recruiting students through our reputation across the country. And if you look also to our master's program, you'll see an even greater number of international students. So this past year, we welcomed students into the Masters of Music program, for example, from Malaysia, Indonesia, Mexico.
Oh, fabulous. Ian, it's been great talking to you, and it just seems like this School of Music is in good hands, for sure.
Oh, thanks. Well, I have a tremendous group of colleagues, faculty, and students and staff to work with, and we just do this together.
Okay, well, thanks for being on the show.
Very welcome.